Okay, welcome back. We are on the 10th chapter, and the chapter on dedication. And just as a reminder, or just to touch in again on what dedication is. Usually dedication and aspiration, making aspirations are two essential points in practice. In practice and as a practice. Dedicating has to do with transferring the outcomes of positive actions for the sake of enlightenment or to enlightenment. You dedicate positive actions to the enlightenment of all beings. If it fits into a practice, such as here, the practice comes at the end of Shantideva's teachings, then he's sealing the practice with the dedication. That is to say, in order for all the virtue and the momentum of the positive karma to not become dissipated or corrupted, then he dedicates the merit of his teaching. And as he said, he's dedicating the merit of his teaching and all the merit of the past, present, and future. So in one way, our dedicating merit, or the merit that we've gathered through listening and contemplating and applying as according to our ability, applying the teachings, all that merit, Shantideva already dedicated it. He dedicated all the virtue of all practitioners and all positive actions of the future. And so and when we dedicate it, then we are also joining in the dedication that Shantideva made, and all the great practitioners and bodhisattvas. As we mentioned in the 6th chapter on patience, that one moment of anger can incinerate or destroy the effects of a great duration and quantity of and quality of positive actions, and that specifically refers to good work, to positive actions that have not been dedicated. They say, so that's the dedicating is a very integral, it's one of the three main principles of a practice. At the outset, first, to have this the correct motivation, basically at the outset to arouse bodhicitta as the driving force behind the practice. Then the main practice is to basically not to allow yourself to indulge in distractions. And then the third sacred principle of practice is making dedications of whatever positive action took place. Aspirations, on the other hand, or not on, yeah, on the other hand, or to distinguish aspirations, aspirations is simply the wish that beings themselves attain enlightenment. It's not connected to any particular positive action. So we can say that, say at the end of our practice, or at the end of any positive small act, any small act of patience, any kindness that you um, displayed during the day, that you recognize that kindness, that positive action, and dedicate it, which seals that practice until enlightenment. And then aspiration has to do with kind of your going forward, the momentum going forward. So dedication has to do with completed actions, positive actions, and then aspirations is an anticipatory. It anticipates it anticipates the enlightenment of all beings. So then you can review the first teaching here on that for many details and on those lines. One thing that's kind of beautiful about reciting this dedication, as we'll do tonight before we conclude, like the format or the the verses here, all are we can, as we recite them, we can see them, or we can use those words of Shantideva, or the words of the verses, as catalysts, as connectors to contemplating karma, deepening our understanding of karma, deepening our love and compassion based on all of the different objects of dedication. We're dedicated to all the humans and all the problems and and difficulties of the human realm and so on. And so with each verse, we can bring in what we have already learned about the object of our dedication, meaning the different beings, and develop a love by wishing them, dedicating and wishing for their happiness, and the compassion by praying that their suffering is removed. So these three practices are all incorporated in this dedication. So even just reading this dedication alone is a way to connect with the teachings on karma, what causes or what perpetuates samsara, and a love and compassion for those who are lost within it. Then we are now we are at verse 48. And these 3, 48, 49, and 50, these verses are dedicating specifically to the supreme goal of enlightenment. May beings time and time again make offerings to all the Buddhas, and with the Buddha's unimagined bliss, may they enjoy undimmed and constant happiness. So so these first two verses are making the aspiration that again that beings always uh, make offerings and venerate though enlightened beings. May they emulate the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and may they make offerings to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas as ways of perfecting or accomplishing the two kinds of accumulations: the accumulation of merit and conceptual merit, and the accumulation of wisdom and non-conceptual merit. And with the Buddha's unimagined bliss, may they enjoy undimmed and constant happiness. So through the blessings of the Buddhas.
I just want to see what number that is. You should say that out to
everybody. And with the Buddha's unimagined bliss means with the blessings of the Buddha, the enlightened mind, the endless bliss of the enlightened mind, may they enjoy the inconceivable constant happiness through their blessings. And 49, may all the bodhisattvas now fulfill their high intention for the sake of wanderers. That is, for the sake of wanderers. See, they use wanderers for the sake of those who wander in samsara, beings. May the bodhisattvas fulfill their high intention. In other words, may the bodhisattvas were aspiring that, or praying that the bodhisattvas bring beings to spiritual maturity. This has to do with our direction, or our aspiration here is directed towards the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, or the Bodhisattvas. And then in the second two lines, may sentient beings, here and then our attention is, or our aspiration is towards the object of the action. So bodhisattvas are the agent of the action. Here the sentient beings are the object of the action. May sentient beings now obtain all that their guardians wish for them. May beings swiftly be assisted by the bodhisattvas and attain all that the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas aspire for them, which is temporarily happiness and ultimately final enlightenment. Then verse 50, this is the last of these three in this category of dedicating virtue as a cause for the goal. And may the hearers and pratyeka Buddhas gain their perfect happiness. Only two lines on this verse. It's in the original Sanskrit and Tibetan. The verses weren't numbered. It's kind of a convention that is introduced here. So, and may the hearers here means the Shravakas, that is those who hear the teachings and then, expound. They kind of turn it over. They hear it, it goes in, and then they expound it as part of their practice path. And then the Pratyeka Buddhas here who attain, or their spiritual path, the wisdom of their spiritual path is attained by their own uh, contemplations of interdependence. They have the wisdom of interdependence arises on the basis of their own what it's called, I think, a self-arisen wisdom. They don't rely or talk about or make much of the teachers, as say, in distinction from the Shravakas, that the hearers, listeners, who are sort of agents of what they've heard is significant, and they expound it. So may those two, who are sort of emblematic or the epitome of what we would say is the Shravakayana, Pratyeka Buddhayana. Pratyeka means private, like a private enlightened being, kind of private, not private, a private Buddha. But the Buddha or the enlightenment that is here has to do with realizing a certain level of non-self that, according to the Mahayana view of enlightenment, it's not a complete enlightenment. There's a partial wisdom of this non-self of the there is a wisdom of the non-self of the individual, and a partial wisdom of the non-self of phenomena. According to the Mahayana enlightenment is considered to be supreme enlightenment, Buddhahood, which is a complete realization, or the wisdom of complete non-self of both the individual and phenomena. Oh, wait, not to get too much into that, but that's why sometimes it can be referred to as the Hinayana, means a lesser path, meaning it's one's own liberation. But in Mahayana, it's the vision is this universal universal enlightenment. But may they gain perfect happiness, may they have an end to their suffering, and may they attain this complete, unsurpassable state of perfect enlightenment. That's our aspiration for them. Then in the next verse, 51, this section has to do with dedicating for one's own sake, and as the cause, sort of a causal for enlightened activities. It's dedicated to one's own enlightenment, and as a cause to one's own enlightened activities. Oh, he says in verse 51, until through Manjughosha's perfect kindness I attain the ground of perfect joy, may I remember all my lives and enter the monastic state. Of course, as we discussed earlier, Shantideva's principal meditational practice is yidam, was Manjushri, and so then naturally he received all the blessings and his from his relationship with the Bodhisattva Manjushri, with the meditational deity Manjushri. And so he's saying here, even though in the commentary it says that Shantideva is not, he's not stating his own uh, spiritual status, but he is speaking on behalf of his disciples in the future when he says, basically, until I attain the ground of perfect joy. Uh, so may I remember all my lives and enter into the monastic state. Of course, the ground of perfect joy, the ground here means bhumi, the level, and the 10 levels of the bodhisattva, according to the sutra path, the sutras, the Mahayana sutras. Then there's 10 bodhi, 10 bodhisattva levels that are to be traversed by bodhisattva. They're not actually uh, levels that exist so much as they are names or qualities that can be assigned to an individual as they uh, bring to perfection the two accumulations of merit and wisdom. So that then there's 10 grounds, you could say, or 10 levels. And also on the path is what's called the 5 paths: path of accumulation, the path of application, the path of seeing, and then the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning. This path of seeing is uh, is what to say? It's the same as the first bodhisattva level. The first bhumi of the bodhisattvas occurs at the beginning of the path of seeing. Path of seeing, and the first bodhisattva level of the joy, perfect joy, consummate joy, has to do with a confidence of the recognition of one's own Buddha nature for what it is. And from that point on, for an individual, there's no difference in the mind that has been realized between a person who has reached the path of perfect joy and a fully awakened Buddha. That the realization is not is identical to a fully awakened Buddha, but there are still certain habitual patterns and obscurations that need to be more thoroughly refined away through the practice of the paramitas. And it's at the first level of the bodhisattva bhumi, and the path of seeing. That's when an individual could be called, say, a bodhisattva in the true sense of the word. And it's through in one's meditation, for a meditation that's called a settling in equipoise meditation. Then that is when they are uh, uh, settling into the nature, the Buddha nature. Then when they rise from that state, then they enter into activities to bring benefit to sentient beings. and their meditation is to carry out the paramitas, uh, realizing basically that's when you enter into the practice of the paramitas beyond the three spheres, as we mentioned, recognizing the empty nature of the agent, the actor, the emptiness or the non-self of the object, and the non-self or uh, the lack of reality of the action itself. And the paramita of generosity is brought to perfection, you could say. Then it becomes the perfection of generosity is accomplished at the first bodhisattva bhumi, which then becomes the basis for what could be called the second bodhisattva bhumi. Anyway, so until I actually become a bodhisattva in the true sense of the word, then may I remember all my lives. And we see this frequently in texts and prayers and aspirations, that it's good to recollect your previous lives. What will the effect or the what's realized when we have a recollection of our previous lives is it deepens our understanding of causation, of karma, and also it reinvigorates and gives us confidence in our bodhisattva or our bodhicitta commitment, our bodhicitta vow. Basically, if we can remember our past lives, then we won't forget bodhicitta, and our understanding of karma will be much more sensitive and aware of cause and effect, causes and conditions. And enter into the monastic state. Basically, Shantideva is making an aspiration to embrace perfect discipline, which is exemplified by the monastic ordination. Then it's mentioned in many places how these days, modern times, which I know modern times has to do with, I think when we talk about modern times, we're not talking about, say, the 21st century. We're talking about the last maybe 1500 years. These are the kind of degenerating times, meaning from the time of even Shakyamuni Buddha. Shakyamuni Buddha, as a bodhisattva previously, made a vow. His bodhicitta vow was that he made an aspiration to be born during degenerate times. And so he was the kind of the first Buddha. I don't know about this exactly, but this is sutric history. I'm not sure, but he is our Buddha, the Buddha of these degenerating times. And what started in motion during the time of Buddha Shakyamuni, even though it seems like, wow, how quiet it must have been, how few people there must have been. But but his teachings are for these times, and we're all evidence of that. And it was taught, Buddha taught that during the time of the Buddha, which could be called sort of the it was very easy to maintain ordination. It was very easy to maintain the virtues embodied in homelessness. Taking the life of a homeless person, leaving home, they call. That there was the support for that was there, and to be part of Buddha's entourage and retinue, that maintaining those vows through the influence of that collective and that collective, it was much easier to maintain those vows, and that it would become much more difficult as time marched on, as things became more degenerate. That is to say, part of things being degenerate is that the kleshas increase. They don't degenerate, they actually become more powerful, more stronger, more part of what influences us. Less sort of space between our thoughts and our kleshas. So it says that uh, even to just keep one vow, to take a vow, not just to happen to be a naturally good person, but to take one vow, uh, one vow of a nun or a monk, even, and to hold it for one day, the merit, the virtue that's created in the mind stream of that individual who took that vow, the merit is greater than having taken and held all 250 some vows during the time of the Buddha. So, of course, uh, So then, verse 52 is thus may I abide, sustained by simple ordinary fare. So, in that life, in my future life, Shantideva is saying, and we are making aspirations in that way, and may I be healthy and happy with whatever comes to me in the way of food and clothing. May I always be content with that, and in every life obtain a dwelling place in perfect solitude. Perfect solitude here means may I always have a place, a dwelling place, that's a proper place for practicing virtue, both in its outer anyway, in the eighth chapter, meditation. There's a long passages on the qualities that are considered necessary for attaining meditation. And so those he's praying here that he will always have that kind of a dwelling place. He'll always dwell with the outer, inner, and secret levels of a proper place. Whenever I desire to gaze on him or put to him the slightest question, may I behold with unobstructed sight my own protector, Manjughosha. So anytime I have a Dharma question, then may Manjushri come and appear actually before me, as if he was actually a person before me, to resolve any of my doubts, to guard my practice and protect me. Oh, then 54. To satisfy the needs of beings dwelling in the 10 directions to the margins of the sky, may I reflect in all my deeds the perfect exploits of Manjushri. So so may I easily satisfy both the immediate and ultimate goals of beings. May I be able to bring their potential to complete actualization for all beings, to the margins of the sky, anyway, that kind of idea. Everywhere, beings everywhere. And uh, may I reflect in all my deeds the perfect exploits of Manjushri. So both Manjushri and also Avalokiteshvara and Nivarana Vishkam and all the great Mahabodhisattvas, you should emulate their the scope of their activities, the their activities that are sort of just outside, I think, outside the reach of our rational or conceptual capacity. When we read about the activities of the bodhisattvas, which are, we can right now. There's just so many sutras that are available that 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 are stories or teachings of the Buddha on the exploits. I don't know, exploits. The activities, the enlightened activities of the bodhisattvas, even bodhisattvas whose names we've never heard of, are brought out and discussed by Buddha Shakyamuni in the sutras, and you can find out all these things very easily these days, even on your phone, thanks to the activities and compassion of Chinsi Rinpoche and the wonderful translators at 84,000 who make these all available to us. So it shouldn't be a mystery when we read perfect exploits of Manjushri. Like, well, what are they? It shouldn't be a mystery. We can very easily find hundreds of pages of discussion on what Manjushri actually did, who he served as the different Buddhas he served in different realms and so forth, and his emanations of body emanations, speech emanations, mind emanations, right up to this day, and all the other great bodhisattvas. So we should dedicate all the roots of our virtue and make aspirations that we become like that. Then 55 says, and now as long as space endures, as long as there are beings to be found, may I continue likewise to remain, to drive away the sorrows of the world. So may I continue likewise to remain, meaning as someone who works for the benefit of others. May I continue to remain in samsara, involved with others, but just like a lotus is in the mud, rooted, but the activities of the lotus, the display of the lotus is pristine, is untouched. It doesn't come through to the beauty of the flower. That's why the lotus is kind of is a symbol of the bodhisattva in that way. That it's part of the pond, it's part of the mud, part of the water, but it itself, the display of itself, its activity is displayed to others, and it's completely pristine, pure beauty. What do you say? Glistening, uh, inspiring uniqueness. So may I also remain as someone who works for the benefit of others. to relieve their suffering temporarily and ensure that their potential as a Buddha is accomplished. I always remember the image of the Manjushri who endless sentient beings. Then a Manjushri enters into the hell realms and just takes one hell being and lifetime after lifetime guides and guides, directs them towards virtue, directs them towards the training of the Bodhisattva, and takes them as if by the hand and brings them right to the base of the Bodhi tree and sits them down there and turns and goes back to find another. This kind of endurance and commitment. Pains and sorrow. Oh, then 56. Just kind of thinking makes my mouth go dry. you know. Okay, 56. Okay, now this is the aspiration of Shantideva and this bodhicitta, this bodhicitta aspect. The pains and sorrows of all wandering beings, may they ripen wholly on myself. Thus he's making a wish, a prayer, that all the sufferings of all beings peel away from them and come into him, right into his own being, into his own heart. And by that, may the causes and the effect of others uh, be purified. In other words, he's making his aspiration is that may he remove the suffering of others and absorb them into himself as a purification, and that others become freed from the effects of their all their negative actions, both the causes, which are actions motivated by the poisons of the mind, and the results, the suffering of the six realms: heat, cold, hunger, thirst, servitude, uh, suffering, pain, birth, old age, sickness, death, all the suffering and its causes, may that all ripen on myself, he says. And may the virtuous company of bodhisattvas always bring about the happiness of beings. So may the virtuous company of bodhisattvas, may the bodhisattvas, through the power of their bodhicitta, to their accumulation of merit, their accumulation of merit and wisdom, and what merit and timeless awareness, if you will, and to their power of their aspirations, may they bring about the immediate and ultimate happiness of infinite beings. So that is the Bodhisattva attitude, Bodhisattva mind as an aspiration there. So these are all the dedications for the sake of one's own enlightenment and as a cause for the enlightenment of for the development or the fruition of enlightened activities, as we said. Then this last verse, last two verses, verse 57. Now he's dedicating for the sake of the doctrine, for the sake of the teachings of enlightenment. May the doctrine, the only cure for sorrow, source of every bliss and happiness, be blessed with wealth, upheld with veneration, and throughout a vast continuance of time endure. So this is a this is a point here. Of course, here what we mean by the doctrine, meaning the teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni and the subsequent commentaries and so forth of those on those teachings, as well as the teachings themselves, divided up into the discipline or the Vinaya, and then the section on meditation, and then the section on the Abhidharma, the wisdom section. It's what's called the Tripitaka, the three baskets, as one classical formulation or arrangement of all of the teachings of Buddha, all the 84,000 topics that the Buddha covered are all arranged in what are called the Tripitaka. And the Tripitaka has both has two aspects. So when we talk about the doctrine, interesting, we use the term doctrine here, but Buddhism is there is a doctrine, but Buddhism is the most non-doctrinal system. You never follow something of that because of the doctrine, doctrinally. But the teachings we say is a doctrine. The teachings, usually we say teachings with a capital T. That makes it. It's through this twofold aspect of the Dharma. The teachings is the teachings or the Dharma of transmission from the time of the Buddha down to the present. There's been a continual, uninterrupted current flow of the teachings as they were originally laid out, and that is the doctrine or the teachings of the transmission of the you could say the scriptures or the written teachings, written or oral teachings themselves. And then there is the other aspect of the doctrine or of the teachings is the practical realization of those teachings. And so that's what's discussed here as being the only, or mentioned here as the cure for sorrow. It's the remedy. The teachings are a remedy to pacify and uproot the suffering of samsara, uh, both the cause and the effect for beings. Of course, the cause, uh, uh, once a seed is planted, then it according to the basic teachings on cause and effect, then the connection between a cause and its result is infallible, that it must, it's ineluctable, it must come about. But through the intervention of the teachings, what does come about as the result of an action, say a negative action, can be experienced quite differently if we apply the teachings of the Dharma. So it's not that things won't be experienced, but they'll be experienced quite differently, quite, we could say, on for ordinary people, quite things can be, we can experience a lot of negative actions in a very manageable way. And then when it talks about here, when he mentions here, be blessed with wealth, upheld with veneration, then he's talking about, of course, that it's those who are upholding the Dharma, the practitioners of the Dharma, and the upholders, those who are the teachers or the abbots or the Dharma masters who transmit who give the transmission of the teachings, and those who bring, or those who are practicing to accomplish those teachings. Of course, they're not two mutually exclusive groups, but the Dharma itself has these two streams, and one without the other. Uh, if we don't have the Dharma of transmission, then we won't know how to practice to full accomplishment. And if we just have the scriptural transmission, then there'll be no life force to that doctrine or to the Dharma. It'll just be words. So they both need to be upheld and practiced. And so this is what Shantideva is dedicating towards, and making aspirations that the transmission and practical realization of the Tripitaka continue and be upheld and protected and practiced and brought to accomplishment. And that is also, may it be blessed, meaning here this has to do with, may it be supported by those who are in a position to be the benefactors of the Dharma. May those who are upholders of the streams of the doctrine, may those upholders be supported, and may their needs be met, and may the occasions or the ability to practice or to give transmissions or to receive teachings, may all the sort of the container for the Dharma, may that be supported by those who venerate, those who are upholding, and those who are practicing. Be blessed with wealth, meaning that they be supported by those with the capacity, with wealth, with the capacity to sponsor the container, to support the container for these teachings. And throughout a vast continuance of time endured. Basically, until the world ends, may the teachings of Buddha persist in the world until the end of the world. So we have, in general, all these dedications. We have, when we're talking about here, particularly here, this upholding of the teachings and practicing the teachings. Then we do this with using these words. With our words, we recite and make these, plant these seeds. We make these aspirations, and also we should, when we recite these verses, we should also uh, uh, consider or think how wonderful it would be if the doctrine spreads, if the teachings of Buddha spreads, and everyone comes into contact with the teachings. And so we should infuse our words with a longing and uh, and that longing we should make sure that occurs by a resolution. I will ensure that the doctrine, both the realization and the teachings, endure or are upheld. So we make a resolution, a commitment, or a vow, or a resolution, determination to be part of that. It's not other people's job. And then this fourth point is to pray for the blessings for the power to be able to do that. The power of the wisdom, the power of compassion, and that you will have the ability to carry out your determination, your resolution, and to fulfill the longing you have that the doctrine is will last and endure throughout a vast continuance of time endure. And that's how it happens. If we look at history, just in our ordinary linear history, uh, you know, Buddhism as a Buddhist practice itself. Even you look, I remember hear about Ashoka, who converted to Buddhism after an extremely bloodthirsty campaign all across northern India into Middle East. And then he realized he converted to Buddhism, and then with all his power and wealth, he poured it out into creating a container, a great flourishing in third century uh, of Buddhism. Stupas everywhere. Every off-ramp had a stupa, and there were monasteries and statues and temples and places of worship. And he encouraged everyone to practice in such a way, both for his own atonement and his own devotion. He had some sort of experience that converted him to the path of virtue, the Buddhist path. And his children also, even, I think he had 2 sons and he had a daughter. And anyway, he even encouraged them to not, or they wanted to become monks and nuns, and he didn't discourage them from that. So that basically his whole, after him, everything fell apart. He was so non-political that he took no steps to kind of perpetuate his ruling, even with his children who were devoted to the Dharma. But he encouraged them to become renunciates and not get involved in politics. So that's interesting contemplation. So the importance of the doctrine is the object or the subject of the aspiration here. And then, so think when you make aspirations, one, use words. You need to words because it's hard to. How long would it take us? How much would we have to figure out how to create these kinds of aspirations? We just make some general kind of offhand. Oh, everybody be happy, But here we're really getting into the fine print of what it is that will actually penetrate into the hearts of beings and uproot their suffering, and really making aspirations with love, compassion, and an understanding of samsara, causes and conditions, and actually contributing. Like when you make aspirations, it's not removed from the object that you make aspirations or dedications for. It's interdependently connected with your motivation and your own bodhicitta. So using words and then longing, how wonderful it would be, and then resolution, making a commitment to make that happen, and then fourthly, praying for the power and ability to do so. These are 4 kind of the chemistry of making aspirations. And now finally, and now to Manju Gosha I prostrate, whose kindness is the wellspring of my good intent, and to my virtuous friends I also bow, whose inspiration gave me strength to grow. I have here also a note that says, any Dharma connection is meaningful, so the Dharma must remain. I think referring back to the previous verse. So with his body, speech, and mind, Shantideva pays homage to his to Manjushri, Manju Gosha, through whom he received the blessings of his bodhicitta. And to my virtuous friends I also bow, meaning all those, because Shantideva was from Nalanda, from the Nalanda, I guess we'd say university, and his Jina Deva, his ordination was, he received his monk's vows from the abbot there called Jina Deva, And so he's paying homage and to Jinadeva and all those who spread the twofold Dharma, the Dharma of transmission and the Dharma of realization, and particularly to Jinadeva, who he received his vows from, and all those masters of Nalanda, because it was through them, the wellspring of my good intent, it was through them that he had the virtue, that he went on the path of virtue, which enabled him to study and to reflect, contemplate, and then to put into practice all the teachings of bodhicitta. And so, and so we also should, using Shantideva as a model, and we also should always venerate and our virtuous friends, our what are called our Gewe Shenyans, means our gurus and our masters, our teachers, our honored teachers, those who took the trouble to teach us, and of course the best way to honor and to bring joy to your teachers and to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas is to bring whatever teaching you've received to perfection, to perfect the teachings. That's the purpose, not be content with the minimum, but start with the minimum and then always keep moving, keep going, as Rinpoche would say. And so we should be someone who upholds the teachings in that way by studying, reflecting, and practicing them, and by supporting the container for these teachings as the best we can. Then, when we dedicate the merit of that at the end of the day, we'll have something to actually dedicate, to put out there as the cause for the benefit of others. So in short, we should uphold the teachings and protect beings. These can be the two fields of our activities, to uphold the teachings and to protect beings, help them. So this completes the Bodhisattva-charya, full name here. This completes the Bodhisattva-charya, the way of the Bodhisattva, which was composed by the master Shantideva. And then there's colophon there of final remarks that the commentary goes into quite depth with. Maybe we cover that if and when we finish the rest of the text. Then I have some questions. I got some questions that that you sent. I cut what do you call it? I I cut the questions out and then put them on a separate document. So I don't know who intentionally, it wasn't like I forgot, but I didn't, I don't know who sent these questions basically. And it's been so long now since we've done this that I certainly don't remember. I didn't have a chance. I got a little bit under the weather for a couple of weeks there. I don't know. I don't know what under the weather. I don't even know what that means actually. But we use it anyway. Anyway, I was sick. So some of the questions I'll kind of put together with others. Question regarding there's one. Then there was a question and there was a comments made about the questions about the first chapter. Uh, and what happened was that somehow through for whatever reason, the first chapter teachings got cut off. The archive got cut off, like in the, I don't know, the 14th, 15th, 16th, something like that, 13th, 14th chapter or verse. It was cut. Then there was no teachings the on the rest of the text. Maybe it was I don't know how long it was cut, maybe 20, 30 minutes. So that's been restored. So you can now the chapter one teachings are all intact. So what was cut off was kind of unfortunate. It was kind of a significant piece, which was the distinction, and there was questions about the distinction between aspiration and engaging bodhicitta. That there was no teachings on that in the archive. So if you're looking to understand the distinctions and what the the distinctions of the classifications of bodhicitta are, you can refer now back to that part of the archive and listen to them or watch them. Basically, just to touch on it, there's the of course, in the sutras, we see many, many different categories of bodhicitta topics, or what bodhicitta is from a classification point of view. But here, Shantideva has synthesized all that into the wishing, or the bodhicitta as aspiration, and bodhicitta as practical engagement. And so this bodhicitta and aspiration has to do with training in the four immeasurables. May all sentient beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering, the cause of suffering, and so forth. These kinds of aspirations that you mentally train yourself in various ways, as there's many teachings on how to actually carry out these reflections and contemplations to arouse this bodhicitta of aspiration. But the idea is that your focus is on the fruition, Buddhahood. May beings have temporary happiness and ultimate Buddhahood. Engaging bodhicitta, on the other hand, focuses on the cause, which are the actions of the six perfections, the activities of the what are called the six paramitas, the 6 transcending activities, conduct. And basically that is what constitutes the rest of the book, is the teachings on the 6 perfections. And bodhicitta in aspiration, as he says, bodhicitta in aspiration, it's great for higher rebirth, for personal sort of charisma, personal excellence, but it still does not bring about the goal of enlightenment that's achieved through engaging bodhicitta. As he says here, great results arise for those still turning in the wheel of life. So as long as you're in samsara, this training in the immeasurables will bring great benefit. But unless it's used as a foundation for engaging bodhicitta, you'll just continue to wander in samsara. So anyway, what is that saying? Oh, okay. So the revised teachings on chapter 1 is not yet in the archive. It should be by the end of the week. Oh, okay. I'm glad I checked that. Okay, well then, thank you for tipping me off on that. Then, so yeah, those are wonderful. It's great to discuss these things, different classifications of bodhicitta and so forth. The whole point of it is not to become kind of it's not pedantry to be to be made aware of these things, but it actually is part of the practice of bodhicitta. And I think one of the most essential practices of the bodhicitta, aside from actually engaging in training the mind in love and compassion and emptiness, but is to really again and again contemplate and study and learn what the benefits of bodhicitta are. Our yearning, our desire for bodhicitta has to outweigh our worldly concerns. Otherwise, the information, the programming, the brainwashing, the education that comes from when we were born till now will just bury our aspiration for enlightenment, our quest for Buddhahood. It will become it'll just become a very little dim little thing. It will not change our mind unless we really praise bodhicitta, unless we understand how for ages and ages and ages, for kalpas and kalpas and kalpas, bodhicitta has been analyzed, and it's always comes out to be the best possible frame of mind that we could train in. So we need to remind ourselves again and again by listening, by studying and contemplating and reflecting again and again on what the benefits of bodhicitta are. Because we are pulled in many different directions. So that's one point. So this first chapter, I really, if we read that every day, it would help. It would help in our practice. You know, it's only 35, 36 verses. And if we study that and study the teachings and expand on it through the teachings, we must really, we can talk about bodhicitta a lot and the benefits of how to be more compassionate and this and that and the other thing, but we really need to create a real resolution by understanding uh, the benefits and advantages of bodhicitta, and that's why Shantideva made it the first of his first chapter was that. Uh, okay, then there was another very nice point to be reminded of in the second, no, it's in the fourth chapter, I believe. Oh, okay. Okay. We discussed the 3 minute. Okay, verse 40, the second chapter. Okay, second chapter is the confession chapter. And what did I said something, the commentary about dying. Okay, second chapter, there's that whole scenario of what our possible future may be when we are dying. And okay, well, this has to do with questioning here. What I mentioned was how to purify the afflictions when they arise. I think here this verse 41, it says, "And when the heralds of the deadly king have gripped me, what help to me will be my friends and kin, for then life's virtue is my one defense. And this, alas, is what I shrugged away." Basically, there comes a point in your dying process, what Shantideva is alluding to is here, where we reflect and we realize that we've neglected the very thing that was significant, and it's our virtue and our how much purification we have accomplished in our life that turns out to be the most meaningful thing. And that comes into focus when we're dying. Like, oops, I forgot to accumulate virtue. Oops, I forgot to purify my negative actions. And so I mentioned here how what's meant is there's according to our capacity, there's three training. There are three things we need to use to purify our afflictions. One is avoidance, to avoid negative actions, to avoid the kleshas when they arise, or to anticipate that they will arise, and then that they will arise because of certain conditions, and then to avoid those conditions. This is, again, sort of in the spirit of the Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha level of practice, where you protect yourself from the kleshas by cutting off the possibility of them arising. And it has to do with, all of this has to do with merit, like uh, how well we can avoid negative emotions as it begins to arise is based on our merit. Merit means another word for merit, or a synonym for merit, is capacity, capability. Are we capable of avoiding merit? Like it says, when a klesha arises, when hatred arises, and you resist it and avoid it, almost like a trunk of a tree, you know, that ability to avoid it by being firm in your mind is your merit. And similarly, then for a Mahayana person, um, like in the mind of a Mahayana person, when say anger arises, then noticing that anger and seeing that it lacks any self-identity, that anger from its own side doesn't really exist as such. It requires a dualistic framework to be threatening. And then if you see, for a bodhisattva or Mahayana person, that you see or are affected by the anger around you, someone else's anger, then you see that anger is that person's expression of their own suffering, and that gives rise. You allow a compassion to arise in the face of that uh, understanding that their suffering comes from their ignorance. They're not knowing uh, the results of anger, not knowing how destructive their anger is to their own welfare, to their own happiness, and how pitiable, how sad it is that they're out of control. So on two counts, then in the Mahayana, the Bodhisattva path, then uh, you recognize the egolessness, the lack of self-identity of the kleshas, and also then give rise to compassion. And of course, Mahayana, this is the kind of what's called converting or transforming the kleshas. Like kleshas become an opportunity. And of course, the merit, being able to do that is an expression of your merit. And it's also your merit that allows you to notice your kleshas arising soon enough to be able to recognize them for what they are. Uh, so when it becomes too late and we get overwhelmed by our anger, or overwhelmed by our envy or jealousy or pride, then we don't have the merit. It's too late, and we start to accumulate the karma of that. So then what the questioner seemed to be referring to was this third method, which has to do with transform negative emotions into enlightened qualities by looking below the surface for their energy and transform into qualities. Well, that has to do with like in a Mantrayana person, um, And of course, then again, this has to do with merit. Just philosophically uh, thinking that way is not the same as actually recognizing Buddha nature in everything that arises. That the essence of all arisings has never uh, departed from, it never has come in from anywhere into our mind, but it's just all just the display of one's own Buddha nature. And in the when that wisdom is in the ever-presentness of that wisdom quality, then whatever arises automatically dissolves. There's no effort at transforming. There's no theory to apply. It happens in the immediacy of whatever arises. And this has to do with Vajrayana practice and the merit of practicing according to the teachings of Vajrayana. That's that's what that is. There's no particular method other than practicing, developing and completion stages to reveal the Buddha nature. So both in the Mantrayana, also Mantrayana includes the Mahasandhi and the Mahamudra teachings also. But both in the Mantrayana and in the Bodhisattvayana, there is the knowing of kleshas as being non-existent. That's the one point where they intersect. And so, and it's, I think for practitioners, for like people like us, we need to accumulate the merit for methods to work. Otherwise, we just cling to ideas about what things could be, or philosophical or symbolic or things like that. But to actually be able to apply directly to our mind methods, whether it's avoidance or transformation, uh, we need to accumulate merit in order to do that, in order for them to work. Of course, merit then, that's why studying bodhicitta is one form of merit, and in particular, uh, practicing the seven branches of practice: homage, offerings, confession, rejoicing, supplicating, dedicating, all these, like we did at the beginning of a practice here, just to recite those few verses is the kind of merit that will enable uh, enable us to apply purification methods or transformative methods and have them work. They don't just happen sort of isolated from the interdependence of capacity, merit. So another on page 62, 910, there's one question on page. It must have to do with careful. Sounds like introspection. Okay, these on the vigilant introspection chapter has to do with the paramitas, verse 9. If transcendent giving is to dissipate the poverty of beings, in what way, since the poor are always with us, that form of Buddhist practice that transcendent giving, so the teach say consists in the intention to bestow on every being, the intention to bestow on every being, all one owns, together with the fruits of such a gift. It is indeed a matter of the mind itself. The what Shantideva is bringing out in these verses, in these initial verses of the text, first in the very beginning, he talks about, or he offers advice on how to reflect on the truth that all harm comes from the mind, all fear and so forth, all anxiety, all this comes from the mind itself. That even the realms of hell and all the tortures are just an illusion, just a dream. They're all a reflection of our own mind. Even our present world, we should see that it's all just a reflection of our own negative mind. And if good things occur and we're able to do certain things, that also comes from our virtuous mind. And so he was saying here how all harm comes from the mind, then all virtue comes from the mind. So then in this section, the first two verses is that paramita of generosity has to do with how the mind, through practicing generosity, how we train our mind to not own, but to be to give freely with no attachment. That's generosity, a mind that can give without clinging, either to the object, to the subject, or to the act of giving, or to any outcomes or expectations or personal agenda. To be able to give in that way, that's the paramita of discipline, of giving, generosity, and it's all a matter of the mind. Similarly, then he goes on to discipline. If discipline means not harming, how can then, when it's perfected, then there's no harm. There's no harm in the world if discipline is perfected. But he's saying no. Discipline is a mind that doesn't harm. Deciding to refrain from every harmful act is the transcendent discipline. That's what discipline means. That's what non-harming means. Refraining from, deciding to refrain from it. And then similarly, patience. And then diligent. And meditation. And wisdom. All these he's pointing to as being that they are also the mind. So basically the chapter is about introspection. So we're learning to turn our attention towards our mind, seeing all harm comes from the mind, and all virtues come from the mind, and then all bodhisattva activity comes from the mind, and so on. And then there's all the different features of how to avoid what will corrupt or distract us from that bodhisattva activity, which is the subject of the introspection or vigilant part. Okay. So that's I think I hope that answers that question. So look at it in the whole context of what of what Shantideva is presenting. Then transcendent giving. And okay, there's one question I'm not so clear on. It says, what are the 4 causes of losing or forgetting bodhicitta? Since there's so many points, so many fours of this and fours of that. And also there's a difference. I mean, forgetting is one, you have carelessness due to loss of mindfulness and vigilance and anger. Like forgetting also implies knowing something that you have forgotten. So when you have taken the Bodhisattva vow, the first way to honor that vow, to practice that vow, is to again study what it is bodhicitta is. What have you done? What vow have you actually made? What does it mean to make a vow to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings? How do I make a living doing that? Really study and figure out what it is what it is you've become. What kind of a person have you become? And what are the commitments that are implied by that? There is the commitments of aspiration bodhicitta, the four commitments of aspiration bodhicitta, and the four commitments of engaging bodhicitta. And then there's the 18 root downfalls. And so these you need to look at and study. Then there's something to forget. Then what it is that makes you forget is something to do with self-interest. If you know the training that's involved in keeping and honoring the vows of the bodhicitta, then and your mind is then set on benefiting others, then what is it that causes you to forget is when you become self-centered and allow kleshas, hatred, or greed, or pride, or jealousy, or something to intervene and to infect your mind. And so then we have the chapter on carefulness and introspection that will, if we study those, train in those verses, those following the advice of what it is that we need to be careful about, body, speech, and mind actions, and what is it that we need to be on the lookout for, And so we have carefulness, mindfulness, and introspection. Those are the three trainings of bodhicitta. And forgetfulness, carelessness, these kinds of things are also undermine our bodhicitta. They replace our bodhicitta with self-centeredness. So that's a big topic, but the carelessness, loss of mindfulness, and lack of introspection are considered the three reasons that we lose our discipline, whether it's our our refuge discipline of not harming, our ordination vows, our bodhisattva vows, or our Vajrayana Samaya pledges. All of those are kind of broken or ruined or dented or bent too far by these three, by the carelessness, lack of mindfulness, and lack of introspection. So hopefully by studying and reflecting on those chapters in Shantideva's presentation, we can begin to sort of crank our crank our mind around and pay attention to it itself, and then recognize, as Shantideva goes on and on and on about who is the enemy, who is it that is really destroying us. That's what we want to know. That's what we need to learn, how to pay attention to that. Who's really the enemy? So like that. So that's a big question, but that I hope that adds something. Then one here's in this time of chaos, disorder, and insecurity, how best to maintain balance and sustain bodhicitta. Well, that's the whole topic of the book. Uh, uh, I don't think that this book is dated particularly. Like this, Shantideva's time and even Buddha Shakyamuni's time, there was chaos, disorder, and insecurity was there. How to maintain balance and sustain bodhicitta. Of course, sustain bodhicitta implies the giving rise to it. Once we take the vow of bodhicitta, then, as from the point of view of the liturgy, then we are expected to, or we should, three times in the daytime and 3 times at night, or at least once in the morning and once at night, we should retake a bodhisattva vow. So if we take these 7-branch prayer and then take the bodhisattva vow at the conclusion of that, as it is in the 3rd chapter of the Bodhicharyavatara, or just read the 2nd and 3rd chapters twice a day, that will, I think, that will definitely provide a frame of mind that will begin to leak out into the chaos. I think chaos, uh, uh, the more we understand causes and conditions, karma. If we're particularly kind of vulnerable to being disturbed by what looks like chaos, we should contemplate karma and how everything arises through causes and conditions. That gives us that actually provides enough. How do I say? That will take away any ground we may have. It's when we cling to a ground and cling to a stability that things seem chaotic. But through the wisdom, through the knowledge of everything arising through causes and conditions, then that ground, that there's no basis for that feeling that there's a ground under us, that everything is swirling around. So sustaining bodhicitta and I don't know, maintaining balance, I'm not so sure. Again, maintaining balance, maintaining bodhicitta, that would be, I think, the best shot at answering that, is to maintain bodhicitta. And how to do that, again, is through the practice of the 7-branch prayer, the merit of that, and taking the bodhisattva vow, many times a day. That will create some frame of mind that will be supportive for, that will kind of create a new sort of standard of reasoning, and it may influence what you decide to put your mind towards. anything other than that's just general comments. I don't just for everybody and for myself too. So that's I'm answering it more like this is what I would want to hear if I had this. Anyway, I think that's about all the time we have for tonight. I'd like to do the if every day you also recite the dedication of merit on chapter 10, which takes about 10 minutes. If you did that at the end of every day, maybe thinking of some good things you did during the day, but by reading this at night, then over time, after some weeks of doing that, you will feel much more inclined to create new virtue during the day, so that you will have something in mind when you dedicate a virtue. So as we dedicate tonight, then think all the virtue of having the teachings, all the patience and the listening and attention you've given, and the bodhicitta attitude to be listening to teachings in order to attain enlightenment for the benefit of beings. So all this, all your attitude and diligence and listening, and you dedicate the merit of that. So on page 163, we'll go through this straight.